This is the New York Police Department's Bomb Squad. Part human, part dog, part robot, all one team.
Lethal and indiscriminate. To disarm one is to save countless lives.
NYPD Bomb Squad has given the all clear.
One reason the members of the oldest and biggest bomb squad in the United States are unique.
Bomb Squad was able to safely remove a device.
When you don't see them, the NYPD Bomb Squad is always watching for that unsuspecting threat.
NYPD Bomb Squad racing in, then hauling away another suspicious package.
Package has been properly identified.
You're listening to Tales from the Boom Room. Profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. Waiting for this one for a while. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 199, part 3, the final part of the episode 199 miniseries that we've been on. If you haven't checked out part 2 of the 199 miniseries, that was with Kirk Minahan, who's currently a podcaster of Barstool Sports, of course, formerly of WEEI in Boston, number 1 over there in the mornings. And before that, all of you gave me great feedback on the episode of Billy Kennedy for the E-Men miniseries, and he was great. That's one of the instant classics of the show, one of the best episodes in the history of the show. And I'm sure this episode tonight for volume 27, Tales from the Boom Room, Profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad, will be no different with my next guest, who for 15 of his 20 years on the NYPD, he did the least nerve-wracking thing anybody could do. I mean, there's nothing nerve-wracking about it, right? We're only talking about defusing bombs here. I'm being sarcastic, of course. He came on during the preposterously large academy class of January 1982 and spent the first 5 years of his career in the boogie-down Bronx as a very active cop, before getting to the Bomb Squad in the winter of 1987, where for the next 15 years, he'd partake in some very daring jobs and work alongside some truly great people who we'll be talking about tonight. And that, for volume 27 of Tales from the Boom Room, Profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad, is one Steve Berberich. Steve, welcome. How are you?
Hi, good evening.
It's good to have you. So tell me about where you grew up.
I grew up in the Bronx. I grew up born in the South Bronx in the 40 precinct area. Moved out of there when I was about 7. We moved up to the Fordham area of the Bronx by the 5-2 precinct, or in the confines of the 5-2 precinct, and spent, I guess, the next 17 or 18 years up in that area until I got married and moved to a couple different places before settling down in the 20th precinct in Manhattan area. Raised my children down there.
Now, before we continue, of course, for those of you in the chat, if you want to fire a question away to Steve, go ahead. Steve's rocking an NYPD Bomb Squad shirt. I'm rocking, I don't know if you can see this, I'm showing it now, a Truck 2 emergency service shirt here. Special thanks to the fellows from Truck 2 that gave me this. Trying to get the logo in there. There you go. So, of course, the Cotton Club doing it large over in Harlem. Thanks, guys, for the shirt. I'm wearing it tonight on the show. So, some guys rather be the fire department or the police department. They grow up around the job, so to speak. They either have a friend of the family that's in it. They have their dad, of course, that's in it, or an uncle. Was that your case?
No, it wasn't. I grew up in a family of sandhogs. My father was a sandhog, and 3 of my brothers were sandhogs. And, we had no law enforcement in my family. Matter of fact, it was the opposite. We had a couple of people that did prison time.
Well, it's good that you went the other way. So, for those that don't know what a sandhog is, obviously it's in the construction business. Tell the audience what exactly that entails.
The sandhog's a very old union. It started years ago. I guess after the building of the, I'd have to say it was during the building of the Holland Tunnel. Then all tunnels were built in New York City. If they weren't open-cut subway tunnels, they were built by a group of laborers, Local 147, members of Local 147, built all the tunnels in New York City. Water tunnel, number 1, going back, 100 years. Water tunnel number 2, where I work mostly on. More recently, the 63rd Street subway tunnel. I did a little work at night at that site, and various locations of the water tunnel. The tunnel goes from the Bronx through the Bronx into Manhattan, through Manhattan into Queens, and there's the second section goes down into from Manhattan into Brooklyn, just outside the Queens Midtown Tunnel, I should say.
Mm.
No, it was the Brooklyn Tunnel. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. But through the Brooklyn Tunnel, on the other side, there's a shaft. So there's a series of shafts throughout the city that the water comes down from upstate New York and various reservoirs, taps in up in Yonkers, and it goes into a big distribution chamber and goes down into the tunnel, and it's fed all by gravity. The water system has no pumps on it. It's all gravity-fed tunnel. Comes down at such a pressure that it comes up 900 feet up into the city streets, and it's distributed into our water system. It's one of those jobs that you take for granted when you turn the water tap on. You don't know where the water comes from, but it just magically appears. But it's many years of work. Started, I think, water tunnel number 2 in 1972. I started on the job when I was about 16 and a half. Wasn't supposed to work. Gave him a phony ID and started working. First day I went to work, within 2 hours, they had me carrying a box of dynamite on my shoulder, bringing it over to it was in a distribution chamber up in Van Cortlandt, and sort of liked it better when the paycheck was quite large for a 16-and-a-half-year-old.
Right.
And got in the union at 18 and worked that until I went to the police department at 26. Matter of fact, I was down the tunnel when I was notified that, hey, you just got the notification you're going to the police department tomorrow. What happened was my wife got the phone call. She called the job site, and they made a couple of notifications down into the tunnel and got to me that day. This is your last day of work. This is what one of the guys told me. That's it. You're gone. You get sworn in tomorrow. And that was January of 82.
Talking with Steve Berberich here in the Mike the New Haven podcast, volume 27 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. We got Billy Ryan watching tonight. He says, looking forward to hearing from Ziggy. Jay Driscoll's watching, Joe Maliga, Christian Williams, of course, Jason Moody as well. And Steve Stefanakis, still active, still getting it done with ESU. So
Hey,
Stevie, one of the best, one of my favorites. And Joe Maliga, to answer your question, no banner tonight. Unfortunately, I'll try to get it up at a later time. So that said, I mean, the construction jobs, especially when you're talking about, any construction job is dangerous. There's no such thing as an easy construction job. Was it lucrative pay back then, especially because you ended up being a foreman at one point, you were telling me?
Yeah, the pay was quite good. To the point that when I went to the police department, I cut my salary in half and then some. The money was good. I can't recall exactly what they were making, but it was filled with danger. I believe they lost 20 guys on the building of the first water tunnel. It used to be at one point the rule of thumb was one man per mile, and X amount of men per number of shafts. I can't remember. I had a guy get killed right in front of me on the job in 100th Street and Columbus Avenue. He fell down the shaft, fell about 400 or 500 feet. And it turns out years later, I find out that the guy that did the recovery, the body recovery, was the Sergeant Joe Ahern in the bomb squad. He was in emergency service. We got talking about different jobs, and he told me, yeah, he had gone in there one time and remembered it was, in late fall. It was actually on Halloween in 1986, if I remember. I'm sorry, not 86. 1980, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And did the body recovery. I said, we were up the shaft. We knew the guy had perished. He fell 400 something feet. And just a very dangerous job. Guys died in so many different ways on that job. So, I guess, one of those things that just follow jobs that were dangerous.
And Joe Ahern's a guy I got to get on this show. I know he's down in Florida now. I mean, that guy, talk about nails. I mean, again, he had another Truck 11 guy, as we joke, right? Because an ESU guy that went into the bomb squad, but he handled a lot of crazy jobs. So, I remember talking about this with one of my friends from the FDNY. He worked for the light company before he got on. I think it was Con Ed before he got into the fire department. He was saying, that a lot of guys in the academy class with him, naturally, this was their first job. It was the fire department, as I'm sure was the case with you in the academy. A lot of people, the police department was their first job. Do you think having previously been out in the workforce in a much different capacity, granted, but previously having been out there, gave you a little bit of a leg up, and entering the police academy gave you a better perspective on things?
I don't know if it did. I mean, I knew nothing about police work. Pretty much took the test. I think I mentioned to you when we talked before, because working in construction industry, you always had your layoffs, and that's one thing that sort of bothered me. I was newly married. I had a newborn baby at the time, when I went to the police department, and I just don't want to have to chase unemployment, and figured, okay, I'll get 20 years of steady paychecks, and not have to worry about getting laid off.
Yeah, no, this was post. Sorry,
and I knew there was a retirement at the end of the 20 years, or further if I went any further than 20 years. So wasn't going to get that working as a sandhog. Would have been years of work and then years of trying to find other work.
Exactly.
So,
no, and to your point, this was after the fiscal crisis, so at least there was some stability there that you didn't have to worry about what happened to so many other guys in the 70s, and that they were getting laid off from both departments, police and fire. And even back then, pre-merge, obviously, the housing cops were affected, so were the transit cops. So that academy class is, I think, the largest in NYPD history, or certainly one of the largest. I mean, it's larger than most police departments nationwide, to put it into context. You guys had to divide it up into different sections and different tours even. And after you got out of that, in the summer of '82, you get into NSU 7 in the Bronx. Now, policing is dangerous, period, as it is. But I feel like working during the summertime, especially in a metropolis like New York, that's really where you hone your skills. And the Bronx, if you think the Bronx is active now, imagine back then in '82 when you came on. How do you feel working in an area like that was a true hot spot, really shaped you as a cop?
I worked in the 50th precinct. It wasn't the most active precinct.
Oh.
We had a couple of areas, Marble Hill and in around Kingsbridge Road. But what happened working there is I worked with a lot of old timers, guys that had 20 plus years on the job or nearing 20 years. And at the time, there were quite a few veterans of the Vietnam War. So it sort of helped me get along a little bit better, working with older men as opposed to, the handful of us that went to 5-0 at the same time were pretty much split up to different squads. But the thing was, working with the older guys, they didn't want to make arrests, take collars, as they say. So I would get them, But I learned pretty quick. My NSU tour was only 4 weeks. I got out of the academy. I was told the top 10% out of the academy class, and I think there were 2,600 of us were going into NSU just for 1 month, and then getting transferred into the precinct. So got out of the academy end of June, did the month of July in NSU 7, and right over to the 5-0 precinct. Did the next about 2-3 years there, and then I went over to unit that worked out of the 5-2 precinct out of the NSU office. It was called TOPAC, Total Patrol Concept, was the name for it. And I had to run with a really good cop, a former Marine, and he was a corrections officer, Dennis Fagan, and him and I were pretty much cut loose. Go do what you want. Give us quality of life summonses and arrests, and we decided to stick around the 4-7 for the most part, in the 5-2, and make street collar arrests for whatever we could get. You know, pretty much. It was mostly buy and bust stuff. We watch other people buying the marijuana from these street salesmen and grabbing them, and then go grab the salesman if we could. You know, it was just that was kind of the way I learned, the job. So.
One thing they used to say about toe packing, it's funny, we were talking about it the other night when I was covering the Brooklyn mob back in '97, is the other police are coming.
Yeah, pretty much. That was kind of funny. You know what? We did our thing. Dennis and I did our thing. He went to narcotics afterwards. I went back to the 5-0 for a little while, and then got into the bomb squad. I mentioned to you how I got in the bomb squad. It was kind of like a weird little story if you want to get into that.
Sure. So just to set the stage, and just a shout out to our other friends that are tuning in tonight: Christian Flood, retired NYPD first grade hostage negotiation team detective; Howard Blank, retired NYPD detective out of Taru; and Steve Slavsky, who's an assistant fire commissioner down here with the New Haven Fire Department in my neck of the woods. Hey, Steve, thank you for watching as always. So, yeah, there's for record folks, I think this is still the case. Fireworks in the city of New York are illegal. So if you're in possession of them without any kind of permission from the city, you're going to get arrested, rightly or wrongly. You're going to get arrested, or at least fined at the very minimum. So there was an incident like that, and I'll let you take from there.
Yeah, I got called to go to the school up in Riverdale. Kid bought fireworks in junior high school. So I went over there and seen the vice principal, and he had the kid in the office, and I talked to the kid about the fireworks and pretty much asked him, where he got them from. It was a nice quantity of fireworks, more than just a couple of, small packs. He was selling it in school. So I asked him where he got the fireworks, and he says his father bought them for him. I says, "Oh, really?" So I got his phone number, called the house. His father answered the phone and asked the father how he bought them, and he says, "Oh, I bought them. I went on the computer, had them sent to my house." So I pretty much told the father, bring the receipt down to the precinct. I'm going to have your kid down there. And what I did was, the father came in. I'm going to give the father a summons. I gave the father a summons for the possession of fireworks. Pretty much told him he was an idiot for giving them to this kid, and he'll have to deal with the school on that issue. And what happened was, now I got the fireworks. I had to vouch them. I vouched them in a bag, and Sergeant told me, "Hey, bring them over to the bomb squad office." So I took the fireworks and put them in the back of the scooter. I had a 3-wheel scooter, and it was a long ride from the 50th precinct all the way over to the bomb squad range. I get over to the range, and there's a gentleman sitting down, and told him I had fireworks, and it turns out to be Joe Ahern, Sergeant Ahern, and I asked him, "Do you have any openings?" And he says, "Why? What did you do? Or, what's your background?" I told him I was a sandhog. So he pretty much had me sit down, and we spent the next hour or so talking, and I told him what I did as a sandhog, and I started working with dynamite in the shafts and in the tunnel, and went over to Tovex, and from Tovex to Emulex. I knew how to handle blasting caps and how pretty much set up a safe shot and all that. And he thought enough of it to give me an application, tell me to fill it out, bring it, send it through department mail to the bomb squad office. So I took it home. I think I had a typewriter at the time, or I borrowed somebody's typewriter. I typed it up. Next day, I put a suit on and went down to the bomb squad office, and pretty much walked in with the application. Asked for the CO of the bomb squad. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, if I remember right, thinking he would be there by then. And it was Lieutenant Walter Bowser, and he heard me, and he asked me to come in the office and had me sit down. I think Joe Ahern gave him a heads up about me, and interviewed me for the next hour and a half. And I pretty much talked my way into the bomb squad. I didn't have the background like most guys had. Came from ESU. You had a couple military guys. guys with electronics background. My background was commercial explosives, and that's how I got in. And after that, spent almost a year at the range before getting to school. The reason it took a year is it was an accident down at Hazardous Devices School down in Huntsville, Alabama, where I don't know the guy's name, but a guy got killed during one of the training exercises. And that set things back a few months for myself and a couple other guys getting down to the school. And the rest is pretty much went to school in July of 88. Got in the bomb squad in November of 87, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And after coming back from school, spent a couple more months up at the range until opening came up on one of the teams and got on the team and did my next 14 years on the team.
Now, what's interesting about, that first year is that even if you're not obviously going in on packages right away until you can get some training a little bit with the guys at the range and then obviously down in Huntsville, you can still watch guys. Because think about it. You walk in there in 87 and there's Don, who's already been there for a few years. There's Brian Toohey, a guy that, you mentioned he came from ESU. He's the real deal. You got Dennis Mulcahy's there at the time. Is there a specific guy or guys that you would say that, either directly or indirectly you really learned from and gravitated towards?
Didn't really get much experience with watching things until got on the team. Mm-hmm. Pretty much hanging out at the range was, wasn't what was not at the time a very learning experience. But it was what it was, I couldn't say Frankie Guerrera was up at the range and he was an old-time cop. And he pretty much, there wasn't much to learn from him at the time. Or it wasn't forthcoming, one or the other. The old-timers at the time, I got in the bomb squad, they weren't much into getting young cops that came in up to speed with what we were doing. So, there was only a couple of us anyway, because there was a long lag between them bringing any guys into the bomb squad. And I think what happened at the time, they seen a couple of the guys were getting close to retirement. A couple of them might even get close to maxing out with their time on the job. Guys weren't running off the job back in the 80s like they do today.
Right. Yeah, you have, openings up in droves because of people who are retiring left and right. That said, we're talking with Steve Berberich. This is volume 27 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but that first time putting on the suit and actually handling it where the team said, all right, Steve, it's yours. Do you remember that job?
The first job? I can't remember the first job, actually.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of the jobs. I just can't remember the first job.
Yeah.
Just can't recall.
No, that's okay.
The team I was with, three guys, 3 or 4 of them were all former ESU. They were pretty much into letting me get in the suit. I just can't recall my first job. I haven't even thought of what the first job. Like I said, I can remember a lot of the jobs, though.
Well, so tell me, just before we get into the 90s, when everything really, like you were in the eye of the storm, as anybody who was in the bomb squad during that era was, and that's not to take away from now, you're still very much in the eye of the storm, but back then you could see the changes happening in real time. That period beforehand, I feel like there was just the combination of a lot of domestic terrorism going on, as we've covered before with this miniseries, and also just in terms of criminality, I mentioned mobsters, drug dealers looking to get back at each other. They'll put car bombs, in place where they'll slide a device underneath somebody's car. Political nuts, same thing. Was that something that you dealt with normally back then? What was the most common type of device to come across pre-90?
Pipe bombs, for the most part. They were pipe bombs. Nothing great, sophisticated stuff. Stuff we learned at down in Huntsville. I don't recall getting too many of those things. A couple pulse blasts that you would have.
Mm-hmm.
There was some crazy stuff out there, though. You know, you had the lady that was, she bombed a surgical location in Connecticut. Yeah, I don't know if you know that job, but she.
No, tell me about it.
Yeah, it was a surgical place that taught doctors and medical professionals how to use the staples. I think they just started coming out with the staples.
Right.
You know, and what they would do is get dogs, I think, at the time, and make an incision on a dog and then close the wound using the staples. You know, staples were new, and yeah, it was something. You know, I don't know if they tried it on humans as well or cadavers. I don't know, but she was pretty miffed that they were using dogs on it. You know, and she was an animal activist and from Queens, and she went and placed. I don't recall. I know it was somewhere in Connecticut. I think she might have had done another place. I don't recall the other one, but I know the one was in Connecticut. The place that either did the training or whatever. I don't recall if anybody got injured, but they did find her and go to her house. It turns out that she had a house full of dogs, and none of them were treated properly.
It was in Norwalk. I'm looking at it right now.
Norwalk. Okay.
Yeah.
In Norwalk. But when they did her house, when they did the warrant on her house, she had dogs in there, and they were mistreated. You know, she was no better than, I guess, who she thought she was going to harm. You know.
Right.
You know, which is kind of the weird stuff. You know.
Yeah, that was the thing. I'm looking at it right now because Norwalk is not that far from the city. You could hop on a train. It's fairly close by. Her name was, at the time she was 33, Fran Trutt of New Hyde Park, and it was a radio-controlled bomb set off at the U.S. Surgical Corps. I'm reading it now, and it says Lieutenant Jeff Finch said the device was a sophisticated bomb capable of killing anyone near it, and she planned to detonate it as the company's chairman, who at the time was Leon Hirsch, walked on by on his way to work. So, people, that's the thing. You have so many people that fly under the radar that could potentially build something. And I remember a job a couple of years ago that made the news where Mark Torrey actually gave the press conferences fairly recently. They found these devices in somebody's house in Queens, also in Queens. And it wasn't necessarily a guy, I don't think, that was linked to any specific terror cell. He just had them. And if people don't speak up, that's one of the things that I know is a constant fear of the members of the bomb squad, and understandably so. So I guess, with that said, we could talk about, before I get to the 90s, and again, this is Tales from the Boom Room, Volume 27, the removal process. Yes, you guys have the TCV, which is, for those of you who don't know, the total containment vessel. You throw something, you don't throw it in there, but you put the device in there, and ESU is able to bring it on over to the range in Rodman's Neck. But just to get the bomb safely out, anything can set a bomb off. I mean, friction from, like in the wintertime when we're wearing our coats, the electric shock we get from touching something, any little thing can set off a device. So if it's classified, don't tell me, obviously, but as far as just getting the bomb out of there in the first place and getting it to the TCV, if it can't be rendered safe right then and there, what was the key for you?
Well, when I came on, they weren't, they would teach you hand entry, but that was only for life-threatening incidents. And down in school, everything they did teach you the hand entry, in case you had something on a person, or it was at a location that you couldn't, let's say the oxygen tanks outside a hospital or something like that, wouldn't want it going off there. But everything else that would be taught was, blow it in place using the equipment that they had available or have available. They did develop ways of doing it. A lot of stuff you'd go out with the robot. The robot that I started with was made in somebody's garage up in Connecticut. It really wasn't too effective. It had very limited, because it was hooked with a cable, very limited capacity to use. I can remember doing a couple jobs where you tie a rope around the package and go back as far as you can and around something if you could, or behind the vehicle, and you give the rope a tug, just in case it had a disturbance switch on it of some type. Won't get into that, how they're made, but the bad guys, they find out, You know,
Yeah.
they find out very, very easily how to do it. Different types of things that you could just readily buy. They used to go to Bombs R Us to get a lot of their parts. Radio Shack, they would get a lot of their parts from Radio Shack.
Right.
Stuff they would learn, with publications and or being taught by other people. Some of the bombers over the year hurt and killed themselves and while making devices. Willie Morales blew his hand off making a device and still didn't stop doing what he was doing. He was so, into his hatred for our country. So,
right. And I remember Jimmy Carano saying something about that, not Morales specifically of the FALN, but just in general. He's like, if they take themselves out, too bad. That's one less bomber in the world. So,
yeah, pick up their body pieces.
Exactly. And that's it. And that's kind of, Darwinism at its finest there. But I will say, Paulie Yurku filled me in on this on one of the previous episodes. And I knew the bomb suit was heavy, but I didn't know the exact figure. He told me it's 95 pounds. It doesn't matter if you're a big guy or a small guy. The suit is hot and it can be uncomfortable. And there's dexterity that's involved because you see these guys, they have to move around. They have to get at certain angles to look at the device and potentially diffuse it from a certain angle as well. And you cannot be in it too long. And imagine on a day like today where it was in the 90s and it was very humid and muggy, having to put that suit on makes it worse. What was the key for you to avoiding things like, well, the obvious one being heat exhaustion and that being something that could take away your focus and result potentially in serious injury?
You sort of had to stay focused on getting the job done, as quickly as possible, taking the helmet, at least the faceplate off, between doing the job and then coming back and taking the x-ray. So, it was just not an easy thing to do. It was never easy in the bomb suit, unless it was really cold out. And even then, it wasn't easy. Your hands were always exposed.
Right.
I recall having a job at Fordham University at the prep school, Fordham Prep, probably in July. Real hot day, like you said it was down in New York City today. I'm upstate New York, and it's probably about 65 degrees right now. We didn't get any humidity today. But after doing that job, and I was in that suit longer than I should have been, and that night I felt it. Probably should have went to the hospital. I think I do recall them talking about kidney renal failure and being careful with that. And just ended up going to bed that night and survived whatever was going on in my body. But I was young at the time, so relatively healthy. And but I can't imagine how anybody would do this in constant hot air. I know now they have cooling suits they put on, or vests or ice packs or something. At least I'd hope they would have them. I don't know if they use them in New York, but like you said, hot, heavy. Your field of vision was very bad with the suit. The plate in front rode up on your chest, so when you got down, it was sort of like in your chin. You just had to find ways of doing it, whether you're laying on your stomach or you just found ways of doing the job and completing the task. Like I said before, though, at school they would tell you it's not your McDonald's. Somebody puts a bomb in McDonald's, you could hit it with the equipment or go at it with the robot, and if it blows up, hey, to rebuild that McDonald's. I said it to people after the 93 bombing. If nobody got killed in that 93 bombing, all it was property damage. And that building, as bad as it was opened up within weeks.
Yeah.
Bad as the building was in a 93 bombing, within weeks it was opened up, not months, within weeks. So, and it's just property damage. Yeah, so be it. They lost vehicles, but if nobody got killed in that job, if there's several people that died, it would have been just another building that needed renovations.
So I guess we can get into that now, because at this point, when that happened, you'd been in the bomb squad about 6 years. You got there in the winter of '87, so you're coming up on basically 6 years in the squad, and you got a little bit of experience in your belt. Now, your partner at the time was Don Sadawi, and I think if I remember correctly, he was telling me that day you guys were in the basement looking at old cases. When was it Lieutenant Bozer that came down to get you guys to go down there?
I don't know his recollection of what he was doing, but a couple of us went to headquarters that morning because it was a promotion, and Sergeant Eddie Hayes got promoted that day.
Yep.
That was pretty much his last day in the bomb squad, or the night before. He got promoted to sergeant. A couple of us went down there to see his promotion, and came back to the office. I recall being upstairs in the office, and Jock came over. That explosion in the World Trade Center. That's my recollection. The couple of us were in the office, and I went down there, like Donald, myself, Lieutenant Bozer, Hunt. I can't remember his first name. Jimmy Hunt. Jimmy Hunt. Nevertheless, went down there and waited till the smoke cleared. And once the smoke cleared enough to go in, we walked down that one of the ramps into the garage and seen a big hole in the ground. What I could recall, standing up over the hole, with a couple of the other guys in the bomb squad office, and a supervisor from Con Edison looked down and looked at us and says, "You can't blame this one on Con Edison." And what he was referring to, and there was a number of explosions in their vaults throughout Manhattan, because it was in the winter. It was February, if I remember right.
Yeah, February 26th of 93.
That's when you get these explosions in their equipment because of the water melting down into the sewers, and the salt erodes things. And I looked at him and said, "No, this was definitely an explosion. It was not a transformer." He said, "Well, I know it's not because our equipment's in the other building." I said, "Well, so be it." But what happened was my father-in-law worked for the emergency service unit, or the red truck for Con Edison at the time. I asked him where he was. He says he was uptown today, or that day. And I says, "Good, keep him up there, Bad enough I was on that job." And spent the rest of the day there into the evening, and ended up helicoptering on top of the World Trade Center that night.
That was interesting, because you get down there and it was a chaotic scene. Like, I'll pull up the photo of all the rescue vehicles in front, and one of the guys from Rescue 1 of the FDNY was seriously injured. And that's Kevin Shea, who thankfully made a recovery. But getting down there was, because naturally when something like this happens, people get paranoid and they say, "Okay, well, that's a bomb, that's a bomb, that's a bomb." Was, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the reason that you guys helicoptered up there because there was a report of a suspicious device on the 86th floor?
It was below the 86th floor, actually.
Okay.
It was somewhat below the 86th floor. Yes, the emergency service guys were going through the building, and they came across something that was suspicious in one of the hallways in that building. A package. Can't recall what the package was, but it was some kind of cardboard box. And, we're like, okay, I'm not going to walk up to the 82nd floor or whatever it was on. I can't remember exactly. I know it was below the Sky Lobby, I believe, was the 86th floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was it was about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And somewhere in that mix, just above the bridge, was some bomb squad vehicles that we had. We had, what do you call it? Myself, Donald, and Tony Ridgerello went up to the roof in a helicopter with, I guess, one emergency service guy was with us. And we decided that we would pretty much, two guys would carry the equipment, a bomb suit. We did bring the bomb suit with us and a helmet. I don't believe we brought the X-ray equipment with us, but one of us carried the bomb suit, one of us carried the helmet, a separate bag, and the third guy would what do you call it? Do the job. Somebody had to have the energy to do the job afterwards. So we walked down from the roof to the 82nd floor, I believe it was. It wasn't easy walking down carrying whatever. I don't recall what I was carrying. Probably, knowing me, probably the helmet. So, we went down there, did the job, and found out it was just a cardboard box filled with, I think, magazines or something. I don't know what it was doing there. Got me. We didn't follow up with anything what it was. We just found out what it was, and that was one thing with the bomb squad. Everybody want to know, well, what is it? We tell them I don't know what it was, what it is, but I'll tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't a bomb.
Exactly. And I'll tell you before you continue. It's just for context. For those of you that may not remember, the World Trade Center towers were 110 stories. So even though you're not having to walk 82 flights up, by landing there, you still have to walk 28 flights down to get to floor 82, which is not easy.
It was not an easy task. Right. Luckily, by the time we finished the job, they got the elevator working from the 86th floor down to the sky lobby. So we went up a couple flights and took the elevator back down. I can remember going into the blast area down into I don't know what it called, C3, C4, whatever it was.
I think it was like the B2 level.
Yeah, B levels. Okay, the B levels, the B2. I went down there with Walter Boza.
Right.
Ended up getting into one what do you call it? Room down in one of the levels. It was actually the Port Authority's hardware store per se, and grabbed a couple flashlights. We didn't have any flashlights. Always guilty of that, not having enough equipment on the. So we grabbed those big flashlights with the big batteries on them. You seen them in use on the subways system. The guys when they were working down there, and keeping those for a couple of years. But when I ran into a couple of Port Authority cops, they tell me, listen, if you guys want this stuff back, you could have it. I said, I'll keep it. That stayed in the bomb squad vehicles, those two flashlights, for quite a few years, until it stayed in use.
No, I don't blame you, because it's better to bring too much than to bring too little, especially in jobs like that.
Yeah, that's what happened on a couple occasions. Go grab a flashlight and the batteries are dead or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
So had that happen on a number of jobs.
Talking with Steve Berberich.
I warn people, if you're working in an office building, like my daughter when she first got out of college and started working in in an office setting, to have a flashlight and a pair of sneakers in your office. You go to work in anything other than that, have at least that in your office. I told a number of women that over the years, have a pair of sneakers and a flashlight. Because if you got to get out, you got to get out on your own. You're not going to wait for somebody to come get you.
Right. No, that's true. And plus, if you're working on like the second floor or the first floor, okay, then you're fine. Whatever. Just, walk the one flight down or two flights down and get out of Dodge. But if, like I said, you had people that, and I remember showing the clips when I had the 93 Trade Center bombing show and revisiting that for Tales from the Boom Room. People are walking down from they're talking about from the 86th floor, from the 84th. They were breaking windows up there because they couldn't breathe because the smoke had gone up the staircases. With that. So that, Billy Ryan, you just saw his comment, and I'll highlight it again. It did change everything, not only for you guys in the bomb squad, obviously, but for the arson and explosion squad too. Because I think to that point, listen, have there been incidents throughout the 20th century? Yeah, there was a Wall Street bombing in 1920. There were obviously numerous domestic incidents throughout the 70s and 80s. But at least before 2001, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that was probably, if not for 2001, the biggest job that the bomb squad had ever had, and the arson explosion squad too.
Yeah, it was a big job, and it lasted for months afterwards. Post blast, picking up pieces, going through the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
The information they got really fast, as you mentioned with Donald Sadawi finding the piece of the vehicle. I was really lucky with that one.
Mm-hmm.
that put that investigation to rest real quickly, you know. But still had to pick through the pieces. Somebody had to go to court with it, and they did. A couple of guys, I think, from the bomb squad ended up testifying in that court against the bombers. But at the time, I could recall telling guys that these guys are not done with this. I can recall telling that a number of times that, you know, and having a feeling that they're not going to be satisfied with this. They know it would be, you know, 8 years later they'd come back with a fury against the city, against the United States. Kind of felt that coming.
Right.
A lot of guys, I don't know how many people knew, but the FBI at the time, they were talking, because it was mentioned down in Huntsville during refresher courses, that there was talk about them using planes for as a weapons of mass destruction. I pretty much thought at the time they meant, okay, they'll start bombing planes or something, you know, or shooting planes down out of the sky, not knowing they would hijack a couple planes using box cutters and fly them into the building.
Because what was interesting about that time is that it wasn't out of question to do something like that, because it was Pan Am Flight 103, I think, over Lockerbie that they had bombed.
Right.
And in the 70s, people forget this. There's 2 9/11 deaths in the NYPD's bomb squad history. We'll talk about one a little bit later. One of them is, if you go down to the memorial wall that the bomb squad has at their office in Greenwich Village, one of them is Brian Murray, who died on September 11th of 1976. Now, Croatian terrorists had hijacked the plane with a fake bomb on it, but to give credibility to that bomb, they put a real bomb in Grand Central Terminal, which is the bomb that ended up killing Officer Murray. So, you know, it wasn't out of the question to have terrorists, no matter what their agenda, no matter where they be from, hijack a plane, and even if they didn't crash it into something, at least use it as an instrumental part of their mission.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Lockerbie, you know, again, that thing blew up over land, and they think that they weren't going to get a good investigation out of it. They certainly did. They got a lot of information out of picking up the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess they thought, you know, it wouldn't come back to them, but it did.
I think Libya was responsible for that one.
Gaddafi.
Yeah, Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi, one of his guys who was later sentenced to I only think 23 years for that bombing. So I think he's out now. Gaddafi's dead. He was killed in 2011. And I will ask you, before I get to some of the other notable jobs, I was being a detective, Steve, and I was going through your Facebook to find good bomb squad photos and, you know, help me out with this show. And you were posting some of the old photos of your dogs. You know, the 4-legged friends are so pivotal to the bomb squad's operation, because it's not like you just have them there during the day, you put them back in the kennel and you go home. No, you take them with you. They become not only a part of your police career, but your life as a whole. So when you look back on working with those canines, what are some of your fonder memories of those dogs, and how pivotal do you think they are to the bomb squad's operation?
It certainly added enough jobs with them, and they were used for dignitary protection. They weren't used on bomb jobs themselves. Had to actually remind a sergeant I work with, and he wanted me to, you know, it was one of those what ifs. I was at Shea Stadium during a World Series game or a big playoff game, whatever it was. And a couple of years before I retired, and he pretty much said, if somebody throws something on the field, you know, he's going over this in front of an inspector out at Shea Stadium. And he tells the inspector, actually it was a chief, he tells him that, oh yeah, well, Steve will go up there with the dog. And I looked at the sergeant. I said, I hate going up there with the dog. You know, that's not what we do. And he looked at me and says, what, are you going to argue with me? I said, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just telling you that's not what we do. You know, that's not how we trying to get the sun out of there.
Don't worry, buddy. You're good.
Yeah. So he says, well, we'll talk about that later. I said, all right, fine, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he got mad at me and sent me back to the office, actually. Brought one of the guys out of the office. I was on overtime, so I didn't care, really. I was on overtime. The best part was I went back to the office and got to watch the game on television, and brought one of the guys out of the office. And the sergeant and I talked 2-3 days later, and he said I was right and I was wrong. I said, well, tell me how I was right. He said, you're right in telling me I'm not going to bring the dog up, telling him. I said, you're wrong in doing it in front of, the chief. I said, first of all, I knew the chief. I says, we've talked before. He said, how did you know the chief? I said, well, he was a sandhog and his brothers. I worked with his brothers and his cousins, so it's not like I didn't know the guy,
Right.
I says, I'm sorry you didn't know that at the time, but, but the dogs, with me, I lived in Manhattan. The first dog I started taking home, I wasn't supposed to take home because we didn't have permission per se because of there was a previous lawsuit a couple of years before that with the transit cop because he was bringing a dog home. He wasn't getting paid for it. But the dog was older, and I was trying to keep a female dog that we had at the time. Her name was Danny, but Danny with an I.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to keep her from, being up at the range and getting stressed out up there and getting more time out of her. So I started bringing her home. At the time, we multi-handled unit, and then we broke down to one guy per squad, per team, I should say, and I was the one guy. And the reason I thought I'd want to do it because one, I like dogs. Two, I knew I would get all the overtime. I didn't want to make money, but I said, if there's going to be a job, it's going to be one of the other guys and me. It's always going to be me and the dog and. A team.
Right.
But we did do, I think we did a bang up job, keeping venues open like the U.S. Open and the UN.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go go one day at the UN and the next day at the U.S. Open. They were always around the same time, busy for weeks. I can remember when the Pope, I can't remember which Pope it was, the Pope visited. I think I worked 46 hours straight one time.
That might have been 95 because I remember
95, but I went from straight time to overtime to straight time to overtime. It was the weirdest thing, and got a couple hours shut eye in the vehicle as needed.
Mm-hmm.
But the long visit.
Because I want to say you had him, and I am in 1995 him, and then UN 50. Which it's busy enough when Unga comes around, but then combine that with the other visit and then the fact that it's a milestone Unga. And I imagine listen, even though it was a marathon and a half for you guys, you must have been pretty happy with the overtime money.
Yeah, the overtime was good. I won't complain about it.
Right.
Some of the guys that were getting closer to retirement, it was even better for them, We had one guy that we worked with, and every dollar overtime meant another, dollar of retirement for him.
Right. No, of course. And, one thing about that time is that I feel like you guys in the bomb squad were running around consistently because it wasn't just details. I mean, it was the jobs that would come your way pretty much out of nowhere. Now, I've covered TWA a lot on this show, and there's different perspectives for different guys, but just the time that you spent down there in the hangar and, of course, analyzing and dissecting that flight, when you look back on it, it's been over 26 years now. The 26th anniversary just passed. What was that investigation like personally for you?
I was working that night when that plane went down.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing we could do. We just sat in the office and watched the news like everybody else, and actually responded to somewhere, I think, in Brooklyn or Manhattan the next morning. Hold on one second. Very odd.
That helicopter is one of my sponsors.
Wow. Yeah. Very odd. It's I'm so high up in the mountain too. I'm 2,300 feet, I think.
Yeah, they're watching us.
Nevertheless, I was in the office, and actually I was in the office when a lot of jobs went down. The Atlanta bombing, I was in the office that night.
Right.
It was kind of weird watching the news, and or whatever we were watching got interrupted by the news, and turn the news on, and then we had people calling us. Intel's calling us. What do you know? I said, I know the same thing you know. Put the news on. That's all I know. I'm not calling anybody. But that was the Olympic bombing. But the getting back to 800, I was in the office. The next morning, I can't remember where they bought some pieces and some stuff that floated up.
Yeah.
That had styrofoam in it. We looked at it and said, okay, it's a piece of a plane of some type. And then they started bringing up the pieces and bringing them out to St. Morich's and set up the hangar out at the old TWA hangar. We spotted up there. I think it was always our second day tour, so it was always a team there. But the first day I responded, we sat there in one of the rooms and was watching video from those side scan, whatever they were called, the side scan cameras. That was kind of, one of those things. And you've seen the plane in pieces, and you've seen the seats with people still in them. It was what it was. Nothing you could really tell. And if anything, I just said, yeah, the planes all over the place. And, they started bringing pieces up. They had experts from TWA and experts from, I can't remember who the builder was of the plane at the time. But nevertheless, you'd bring a part over to this guy. He'd look at a number and tell you exactly where that plane, where that piece came from. But I seen things on that I wasn't happy with. One of the service carts looked like a rocket went right through it. The way I seen it, you know. And at the time, you'd bring it to somebody's attention. When I say somebody, FBI, and they would say it was something else. So a couple of us were never satisfied with the finding of it being the scavenger pump, a spark in the scavenger pump. Weren't satisfied with that. There were a number of us, guys that had a little bit more background. Or one of the guys I worked with, his brother worked. It was I think an officer in the Air Force, and he had talked to him. And myself, knowing how to run a boiler, because that's what I did in Manhattan. I lived in Manhattan. I ran an apartment building. I knew what it took to ignite oil, and it wasn't done with a spark. That was oil. Not diesel fuel, but the JP fuel or whatever it was called. That might be a little different, but it certainly wasn't from a little spark in from the scavenger pump.
Well, and plus you had
that issue any day. The same thing with like the bombing of 2001. You hear all these people saying, "Oh, they planted explosives in the building." Like I said, I'll debate anybody that day that building fell. And just the weight of the building coming down. From the fire. No explosions. Because if there were explosions, they were very quiet. That building was there, and then all of a sudden it came down. I would have heard explosions. Would have heard that for miles.
No, of course, especially considering the enormity of the structures. And
yeah,
and just to go back to Flight 800 for a second, that and the final report about that didn't come out until like 4 years later, August of 2000. And you had, like you said, you had an interesting perspective there because think about it, Jeff Oberdier. I joked about it with him when he was on. That was his welcome to the bomb squad moment because, he'd been in the squad a year by that point. He was an Air Force guy. Jimmy Carano was an Air Force guy. Richie Teamsma worked in the airline industry prior to him coming onto the job as a police officer. So it was unique to have guys like that in the office. McNally's an Air Force guy too, giving their perspective on it. And, the conclusions were different, but I think Jeff kind of summarized it best. He's like, either way, with what happened with that plane, it was absolutely tragic because it's one thing to have a plane go down, but the way that it went down, the people on that plane knew their demise. It was not a quick and painless death for them. And that's the thing that I think, for you guys being out there, certainly the emergency service guys that had to go out there that night, the fire department, that's the thing that's got to bother them, all these years later.
Yeah, I had enough years on the job and seen enough things in the time I was on the job and before I got in the bomb squad that sort of put in perspective. Just stay focused on what you're doing and add what you can to help the investigation go along. But again, I don't know what the other guy said, but I've heard others say that they didn't buy into.
No, you're not the only one. I've had guys on this show say the same thing. Like, I mentioned Danny, talking to Danny, he'll go to his grave believing the rocket aspect of it, as he was able to highlight when he was on this show. And it's not that anybody's going through the chat rooms of the internet and putting out things just to put them out there. You're not sitting in the basement somewhere with a tinfoil hat on. You guys were there. You guys lived it. So I respect any perspective coming out of an investigation like that. Certainly one of the major news stories of the 90s. Now, before I get to 2001, you get to a point in the bomb squad where, before you know it, it's 1997, you have 10 years. And then you get to the year 2000, you have 13 years. And you kind of say to yourself, because it's an interesting evolution, wow, I've been here a while. And, I can now train guys the same way guys trained me when I first came in. So when you had the new guys coming in, that even if they might have had more time than you on the job, even if they might have come from a unit like emergency service where they were certainly doing a lot, you had the knowledge of being a bomb tech more so than they did, obviously. So if you ever pulled a guy to the side when he was new and learning his way, what would you tell him?
That was always the thing to try to do, is let the new guys get in the bomb suit as much as possible to get used to being doing the jobs. So pretty much you would show them the equipment and go over the equipment with them on a daily basis as you're working. And, what you had to rely on is the training they got down in Huntsville, Alabama. We all got trained the same way and throughout the country.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to get the job done safely. I had a couple of jobs, and the sergeant says, well, so-and-so is here. It was actually one job I can recall, Charlie Hill being on the job with me, and went to a location in Manhattan. I think it was on 8th Avenue, and it was at a auto repair shop, and they already had the guy under arrest. I didn't find out too much beforehand, but he had a briefcase, and when they grabbed him, he threw the briefcase down or put it down and says, "Don't open it, it may explode." That's the information we got when we got to the location, and the sergeant said, this may go to court. So being that Charlie's pretty much new in the bomb squad, I want you to handle the job. And I said, not a problem. He says, just in case it does go to court, And sure enough, I did the job and opened the briefcase remotely, tied tape to it with a rope, and pulled the rope, and briefcase opened up, and it had a handgun in there and blasting caps. There was no explosives, but he had, if I recall, 13 blasting caps, electric blasting caps. He had a couple other things, a flashlight and a scalpel. I found out later, because they did lock the guy up, and he did go to court on it, in Manhattan. And handling the job, I had to take the blasting caps, and because they were snipped short, the electric blasting caps have very long wires for the application they used in. And but he had didn't shunt them, didn't tie it in. So we individually did that. That was no problem. And brought him to the range and kept him up there until such time as an ADA came up, and we did a controlled blast with 2 blasting caps. Somehow he worked that out years ago. If you're going to do this, you do it on video. You put shaving cream in the can. You suspend one of the caps in there and all that stuff. You let it go off, and you pick up the pieces. So we did 2 caps like that on videotape, and guy did go to court and was found guilty after I testified. But I did find out later, after when I did trial prep with it, that the guy was up at CBS on 57th Street. What is that, off of 10th Avenue, I think?
Yep.
And he was going to take people hostage up there. He kept calling them, and he wanted to show. I can't remember what year it was. It was after 93 at some point. He was up there, in the 90s, mid 90s, and he wanted to show how easy it was to get explosives in the city or in the area. Don't know where he got the blasting caps from, but same thing with the gun, the extra ammo we had in there. But he was going to take people hostage up in CBS. The funny part is when I went to court on this, the ADA at the time, really pain in the neck woman, but we had a lot of shouting back and forth, and did the went to trial on it. And the only one in the room, aside from the jury and myself, and the judge and prosecutor and attorney and the defendant, was his mother. This guy's mother. She's sitting in the back of the room, and little old lady, and I'm feeling so bad for her. But you know what? She raised a dummy. So.
Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah, that was a kind of interesting case. But that's, getting back to your question, I would never hog a job, and, had my share of times in the bomb suit and didn't need to get in on every job. It wasn't easy to work with, especially on a full stomach after I cooked one of my meals. So.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I asked Danny when he was on the show. I said, what was your favorite squad room snack? Because cops got to eat, firemen too, obviously, but cops got to eat, especially when you're working those overnights. And he was saying whatever you were cooking. And that was his answer.
Yeah, cook us decent meals. I can remember one time making a full Thanksgiving meal, and Danny Richards ate with us that night, and I think he flew over to somewhere in Europe the next day. He did some, I don't know, one of these things, whether it was, I forgot, courier service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we flew over to Europe and came back the following day. And 3 days later, he was cursing me because he ate so much and ended up, having to fly the next day. I said, "Oh, you shouldn't have eaten as much as you did." So
should have taken leftovers in
Alaska.
So no, I'll ask you.
But we had long tours in the office. I imagine the guys are still doing it.
Right.
Everybody bring a sandwich and individually eat, or somebody cooks, or you go out. Quite often we end up going out for meal. We had some funny times with that too. We'd go to places near the office, and always had to have the radio on, and it was a constant. Never know whether you in the middle of a meal get a call. Usually pretty lucky with it. So.
No, that's the thing about working in Greenwich Village. There's so many great spots nearby, to go to, and different types of cuisine. If you like Italian, you can get Italian.
Yeah.
If you like Spanish, you can get Spanish. If you like soul food, so on and so forth.
Oh yeah, well, great place on what was that, 9th Avenue, just off of 14th Street.
Mm.
Funny meals out of that place.
Mm.
Plenty good places to shop down here. And
Right.
I live near 2 blocks away from Fairway. I end up bringing stuff in from Fairway and cooking there. Funny part about my meals is they were always about $5 or $6. 5 guys, 6 guys, depending on who's working that night. Sometimes it was more. But I would never cook for more than that. Got a little difficult. But hey, we had to eat, so.
Yeah, had to do what you have to do. Gregory S. Screens watched tonight via LinkedIn. He says, much respect to Stephen and all the members of the bomb squad. That job is the hardest job in policing, hands down. And you ain't lying. You ain't lying. That's all due respect to all the other members of the other units out there. So, I guess we can get into that day. And I guess to set the stage, 97, you guys had gotten tested a lot. I mean, the letter bombs job, 97 at the UN. The month later, there was the shooting at the Empire State Building. And there was the job in Brooklyn on 4th Avenue later that summer. You get through the new millennium, there's fears about the year 2000, what would, Y2K bring. You guys got through that. But there was still the feeling in talking with so many other guys previously that something was coming, especially after 93, like you talked about earlier, and that they weren't done, like you said. And I guess that morning, that came home to roost. And I remember you saying, and then I'll let you take it, in the video that Arlene Harrison did with you, Michael Mixon, and Jimmy Carano, that you had just got done working an 18-hour tour. You were in a restaurant eating, well-deserved after working that many hours, when you had a frantic waitress tell you what was going on, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, that was election day, and I was going to go that afternoon or that morning and actually drive a guy around that was running for city controller, if I remember right. I'm trying to recall his name. Mulvihill, Billy Mulvihill. Knew him for a number of years. He asked for my help, and I was going to give it to him that day. And got off for work that morning. I was going to meet Billy a couple hours later. I literally stopped and got my car washed on 12th Avenue and went home to my apartment up in 71st Street. Told my wife, let's go to breakfast. Beautiful day. Walked down to 68th Street and was having breakfast, and waitress came in. Well, what I found out was a waitress, and she was all frantic, and trying to get the radio on, trying to put 1010 wins on it. Nice sized diner, been in there a number of times, and so I walked over to her. I said, "What happened?" She said, "Oh, she used the words World Trade Center, plane crash, blah blah blah, and all of that." But she was frantic over it. So I just calmly walked over to my wife. I said, "We got to go." Both got up. I told her what happened, and she said, call my wife Audrey, saying that you think it was an accident. I says, "No, it definitely wasn't an accident." I says, "Look at the day; it's beautiful out." Walked home the 2 or 3 blocks to my apartment, and like you said, I got off an 18-hour tour, so I was somewhat tired. And I don't recall if I put the news on, but it might have been on. I think my father-in-law was at home at the time, and he did see something on the TV. I wasn't paying attention to it too much, but I called the office, and Faith Beiser answered the phone, and she says she's in the office, and she says somebody flew a plane into the World Trade Center. Tell my wife, I'm going back down to the office and grabbed the dog. I had Cooper at the time, Choco Lab, and grabbed him, took him with me, and got in my private vehicle, drove down 9th Avenue, went through every light, but I, safely went through, hitting the horn. I didn't have any kind of red bubble. I kind of wish I did have one in the car, but vehicles were stopping for me. I don't think the people of town were aware of what's going on at the time. But if you go straight down 9th Avenue, it leads you right to Hudson, or where Hudson comes in. But at that point, about 14th Street, I could almost see the World Trade Center, but I did see the World Trade Center as I was by that little park that curves down to whatever street that is over there by going towards 6th Avenue. And did see the building burning, or at least smoke. I didn't see fire. Went to the office and signed back into the log, into the movement log. And Danny Richards walked in about the same time. And in and around the same time, Michael Mixon came into the office. And Danny McNally came in. And we went back down. Mike had told us what he seen. And he came back to the office, and he drove whatever vehicle he was in, and I grabbed the keys to one of the SUVs that we had at the time, grabbed the dog, put him in the back of the car, and the 3 of us rode down to the World Trade Center, parked on Church Street, just a block or 2 off of Vesey, because we seen, emergency service and ambulance there, and Michael Mixon pulled over to the side, got out of the vehicle, and looking up at the building, seen it, seen the smoke pouring out of it, and pretty much said to Danny, I remember saying to the 2 Dannys looking up at the building, saying that building's going to fall. And I recall having talked to guys that built it, worked on it. They were saying how afterwards. And I can remember watching documentaries how the building was built. And that was my feeling on it, that building was going to fall. Danny Richards said to me, "We're going to go down there and help people. Are you going to argue with me?" I said, "No, I'm not going to argue with you. But I'm telling you, my feeling is it's going to fall." So myself, Danny McNally, and Danny Richards, and Mike Olmixon walked down, went up the survivor's staircase. And the funny thing about that, people were coming down the staircase, but they weren't coming down the escalators, because the staircase was right next to the escalators. So what happened was Danny Richards and Danny McNally stood together, and I told Mike, you and I stay together. I said, Mike, you and I will guide people to the staircase. There was a long line. It was really weird. There was a line of people trying to get down the staircase, and I broke some people away and said, go down the escalator. I said, the escalator wasn't running. You could go down the escalator. It's just a staircase now. And some people broke off, and they, were able to clear up that line. And myself and Michael Mixon started moving things out of the way. It was debris on up on the plaza. I just can't recall, between those two buildings, between the Customs building, I think there was 3 and 5. Pretty much got people out. They were filtering out some at a couple people at a time. We watched Danny Richards and Danny McNally come back out. And I, said to them, where are you going? Or Mike said to them, where are you going? And they said, we're going down to the street to get a backboard. There's an injured civilian in the lobby. I said, all right. So they went out, quickly, came back with the backboard quickly. And myself and Mike followed them into the, going toward the lobby of the Customs building. And looking up, I could see there were other guys in there. I could see there were emergency service cops in there. And a fireman or two. I can't remember. There might have been more. And I said to Mike, there's enough help in there. I said, we'll go back where we were, and as people come out, we'll tell them, which way to go. Didn't know how much people knew of the location. What I could also recall is when we were going in, I could recall the lieutenant walking, or a cop walking out. I don't remember it being a lieutenant, but I could see a cop walking out, and there was somebody helping him. And the cop's hand, I think it was his right hand, I could see the fingers were dangling sideways. And I could see somebody was helping him out. Okay, he had help. He went to the street. Turned out to be one of our partners, Joe Dolan, was helping the lieutenant he knew from emergency service. He went down to the street, apparently where we were, up on Church Street, and grabbed an ambulance, there was an ambulance down there. Just grabbed a bunch of gauze pad. I found out weeks later when they talked to Joe. Bandaged him up and put him in an ambulance that had a crew with it. Off he went, and Joe told me he was walking back down toward the building because he had seen Mike and I, up there, and he was coming back down again to do what cops do, or what some cops do anyway. And building started coming down, and he was still on Church Street, and he survived it. And Mike and I just turned sideways and took that step to the left. I think Billy Kennedy said that. Some days you go to the right and it's the wrong way. Step to the left. We put our back to the building, stepped to the left, leaned against the glass of the Customs building. Knew the building was coming, and I can remember literally saying, I don't know if I said it out loud. I said, God, kill me. Just don't bury me under this. I was willing to, to die. I just didn't want to be buried under it. And Mike and I got lucky. We knew the other guys were in the lobby. Didn't know, when we finally got out, what would happen was, it took quite a while before that smoke cleared enough where we could see our way out. And the funny part is I didn't know it at the time, but there was one fireman that came out. I could see he had a red cap on his head. I think he was a probationary. He was on his hands and knees. He walked right past us, because he didn't have his Scott pack on. I think he must have got rid of that, or he didn't have one. And he was on his hands and knees trying to walk right past us. But that's his training. I could remember saying to him, hey, the air's no better down there than it is up here. It was what it was. People, that cloud that went past that everybody remembers, we felt that cloud. That cloud came by pretty fast. How we survived it when other guys didn't survive it. Guys that died in the lobby were only feet away from others that didn't, that did survive it. Feet. Just got lucky. I was told like a week later when I spoke to one of the former members of the bomb squad, he had gone down there. A bunch of guys went down there at night hoping to find Danny Richards and the other guys that were missing, and there was no getting anywhere near it. He actually said, "How did you survive it?" I said, "I don't know. I guess I was fortunate enough to survive it." So, yeah, and after the smoke cleared, we went out, got out, got back to the bomb squad vehicle. I thought the dog would be in the back of the vehicle dead from all the dust and smoke, and he wasn't. Luckily, I had the windows closed, had them completely closed, and he survived it. And we rode up a few blocks, got out of the vehicle, and I realized my leg was swollen pretty bad, my right knee. I can remember a volunteer ambulance guy from Hatsola, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yep.
He cut my pants, my jumpsuit up the leg, and see it was bleeding, and threw some water on it. It wasn't bleeding a lot, but it was certainly sore. Something hit me. Don't know what it was. Something was sticking in my knee. Piece of metal worked its way out eventually. That day, went back to the office. Got back to the office, and it was just Mike and I that eventually got back there and didn't know whether the other guys were alive. Danny McNally called in. I answered the phone, and he says, Danny Richards is missing. I thought they would all be dead, but Danny McNally got lucky.
Yes.
Funny part is, after everything said and done, I knew I had to get medical treatment. I ended up back to 68th Street. Right across from the diner was my doctor's office. Right across the street. I went home. I called my son from the office, told him to get home. He was working in the theater district at the time in one of the theaters, and told him to go home, and had him go with me down to or he met me actually at the doctor's office. The doctor looked at my knee and says, "You got to go to the hospital." I called the 20th precinct, identified myself. I got a lieutenant on the phone. I can remember a lieutenant answered the phone and told him I need a car to take me to the hospital. He's telling me, "Yes, sir, no problem." He's calling me sir, and I says, "All right, Lieutenant." I says, "If you could have him come down to 68th Street, two young cops show up at the doctor's office and help me." At that point, I could put no weight on my leg at all. They helped me get in the back of the patrol car, and they were ready to bring me down to the hospital uptown. I can't remember the name of it now. But I said, "No, you're going to take me up to Montefiore Hospital." And we don't know where that is. I says, "I'll tell you how to get there." Right up the West Side Highway, and brought me up to Montefiore in the Bronx. It was my thinking at the time, there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of people going to the hospital. Turned out there were very few people that went to the hospital. Very few people. I think I was the only patient, at least that day, that came up from that incident up to Montefiore in the Bronx. And Danny McNally came there that evening, and I think he was treated for something he had wrong with him.
It was a shoulder injury.
Yeah, shoulder injury. That's what it was. Doctor took, they took X-rays. Well, they were going to do an MRI, but they said, "Man, just probably some metal sticking into an MRI." But they took an X-ray. They said, "Your knee is banged up. We'll operate tomorrow." So they operated on my knee the next day. Torn meniscus, whatever was going on. I had that one operation on the 12th and another one in November. And eventually that knee's going to have to be replaced. I'm only glad it's not both my knees. It's just the one knee, and I'm glad it wasn't more severe. And, the funny part, one of the things when during recovery at the hospital, I knew guys that were in the fire department that were sandhogs, and sort of had newspapers, but I was sort of getting information of who got killed. They told me John Delara got killed with Danny Richards, and right away I'm thinking, okay, I was at Lehman College for a year and a half while John was there, and I knew John from Lehman College, and they told me some of the other guys. all great guys from ESU. I can recall some of the names, like Santos Valentine. I can remember going on a couple fishing trips with him. But then I called the Sandhog office. You know, they heard I had gotten hurt, and they asked about one of the firemen, Dennis Devlin. I said, is he okay? And they said, no, he's among the missing. Dennis Devlin was battalion chief.
Yep.
And the bad part about Dennis was he was on light duty. He had an injury that he was recovering from, but didn't stop him from going down. You know, like I said, some cops went down. Some were told not to go down. They knew, you know, we got to keep guys on, you know, in different places, and you know. But one of my brothers asked me afterwards. He's, you know, after telling him, or you know, days later or weeks later, you know, of how I came to going down there and got off a tour of 18 hours and all that. He asked me, you know, why did you go down? Why would you go down to that? I said, well, that's what cops do. You know, that's what we do. You know, I mean, you know, wouldn't do it if I wasn't a cop. I'm sure. You know,
Right.
cops do. They know the dangers, and, you know, and they just take the risks. You know, don't worry about surviving. You know, so yeah, that was my last job I worked on. It wasn't my last day in the office. I was at home recovering when that other plane went down. I can't remember the whole job.
Flight 587 in Rockaway.
Right in the Rockaway when it crashed straight down into the ground. I was at home. You know, it was only months, so it wasn't that long afterwards.
2 months.
2 months, and I told Audrey, I'm going to go down to the office. I said, I'm sure they're going to be busy down there. I'm sure it's going to be crazy, and everybody's going to be going to that job. And I went down to the office and spent about 3 or 4 or 5 hours answering phones. And the PTS was so bad. As soon as one person came into the office, I said, I got to go. I got to go home. You know, and I did. I went. But I did sign in. I remember signing into the movement log that day. I'd like to, you know, I like to see that. But nevertheless, that was the last time, you know, went in. So it was months of recovery and brought me to my 20th year, and then putting in for my pension and everything. And the rest is pretty much history. Been retired 20 years now.
You know, and Ramon Ruiz is one of your old ESU buddies. He's here. He'll be on the show soon. He says, hey, Steve, good to see you. Great working with you. Be well. Stay safe.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
A very good guy, I think, from Ford Truck in the Bronx. And Rich Esposito said this so well. And well, there's a quote that you gave first, and you said, you know, when Arlene Harrison was asking you about it, it had nothing to do with the bomb squad. We were just police officers that day. And I love that line because it's so true. You know, but when regards to what Rich said when he was on the show, the bomb squad's such a small unit. Every loss hurts. All 14 of those ESU guys, their loss is still felt to this day, especially with those the guys that are still on the job that work with them. Stephanakis is in the chat. He basically knew all these guys, for example. But you factor in as well a small unit like the bomb squad where there's less than 100 guys, less than 50, I think. And I remember a September 19th, 2001 article in the Post that said that Danny Richards was pretty much the heart and soul of that squad. You guys all loved him dearly, and he was an integral part of that unit, both as a bomb technician and then later on as the intelligence coordinator, which is a position he took when Don retired in 2000. So, you know, listen, this is a guy that you had the honor to work alongside for 14 years. A lot of great moments with him. You two were very close. When you look back, this is the thing I always like to ask you guys from the bomb squad about when I have you guys on. When you look back on him, what are your fondest memories of Danny?
Several of the jobs that we did, and I actually didn't think about it until we spoke the other night. Mm-hmm. One job that we handled that was kind of a very weird job. It was him and I, and the sergeant. Sergeants always responded except for the midnights at the time. It was in Brooklyn. I don't know where in Brooklyn. Just a very eerie area. I'm a Bronx guy. I knew I could get around the Bronx at the time and still could. But it was just a very eerie block. And we get to the location, and there's hundreds of people milling about. You know, they block away, half a block away, whatever they could get, you know, these crowds back. And we get there, and whoever was there, whether it was a cop or a boss from ESU or something, and it says, "What do we have?" We pretty much knew we had an explosive, what we thought was an explosive. Well, there's 2 DOAs laying on the ground over there, and I look over, and there's 2 guys dead. They're DRT dead right there, and they're both facing up, and they're head to foot. So one guy's head was next to the other one's feet, and vice versa. And they're looking up. I said, okay, but why are we here? One of them's holding a hand grenade. I says, okay, this is going to be interesting. And it was never intended for both guys to get in a bomb suit, but it was kind of a weird job. And we decided, okay, both of us are getting a bomb suit and go down there and have a look, before we do anything. And we got down there, and sure enough, 2 guys, both of them shot multiple times. And one's hand, I can't remember which body, but he's holding a hand grenade. I can see him holding the hand grenade in his hand. But it turned out to be a Mark Deuce, the old pineapple hand grenade, paperweight. See the hole in the bottom? All he is holding a paperweight. And, we talked to the cops at the scene and find out what's the deal with this. Apparently, a car drove up on them, and they were holding a hand grenade, and they said, we'll toss this in a car, and they lit them up, with whatever. It wasn't a handgun because there were multiple shots in them. We took the hand grenade, and it was the end of our job doing that. A lot of things with Danny, with him and I over the years, play games on him. Remember him coming to the office one time and talking about new shoes he had gotten, and tell me how much he paid for them. At the time I had 2 kids, and a wife and myself, and working side jobs, working another job, and I had a house upstate that I'm in now, that, the house to pay the mortgage and all that. And Danny's telling me how much he paid for his shoes, So at some point he took the shoes off because it was in winter, and he put on expensive pair of winter boots, and he went out of the office. I don't know where he went. He went out of the office. But I took paper and I jammed it into the front of his shoes. A good amount of paper in the front. So when he finally put the shoes on at the end of the tour, he's like, well, these aren't comfortable anymore. I think it took him 2 days before he realized that I jammed paper into his shoes. And of course, when I came back from my swing, he was, right away, what did you do that for? And I said, I didn't do it. I would never admit to doing it. I said, but I found out he walked around for a couple of days before he realized there was paper shoved in there. I don't know how we got it out. He might have even had to go to the shoemaker to get the paper out. But, things like that. Another time he had these expensive boots, fur-lined boots, or not fur, but some lamb's wool in the boots, and I put the punch outs in the bottom of his boots, and he went home. He walked around his apartment. Apparently, he went out for a couple martinis after work. He woke up at some point and he see dots all over the floor. He thought he was seeing things until he got up out of bed and realized that there were the paper punch outs. I admitted to that one, but I've used that one. I've used that on other guys. I got one guy at a funeral. As a matter of fact, it was Bobby Treston. I filled his umbrella up with those punch outs. Great gag, especially if they don't use the umbrella for a couple of weeks. He opened that umbrella outside of a funeral home at a wake, and he's covered with little punch outs, but stuff like that. I think the best one I got Danny Rich's was knowing we were going to range next day. He took his gun belt, and I guess he got it out of his locker. We didn't keep them. None of us wore our duty belt, but you had to have it at the range. The team was shooting together, just the 4 or 5 of us. I took his extra magazines out of the pouches. We all had Glocks at the time. I put all his rounds in backwards in the magazine. I didn't even know they would fit in backwards, except for the top round. I kept that in there, but they fit in. He took a shot with the first round and then nothing. He's standing there and watching. I had told the rest of the team about what I did. He's standing there, and finally the range instructor. It's only the range instructor. There's only 5 of us. He came over and he couldn't. What happened is he couldn't get the magazine into the gun, and the range instructor's looking at it, and he's laughing. We're laughing. The only one who wasn't laughing was Danny Richards, because now he's going to take the rounds out of the magazine and put them in there right now. But we got laughs out of it. Never did anything malicious. He would act like he was mad. I was told by Joe Pikowski that, he would rant and rave when he was in front of me, but had a lot of fun with it. So I actually had one lieutenant, because I was the butt of a lot of jokes in there the first couple of years I was there. So, and I took it well. And he told me one time, stop doing what you did this and stop doing that. Like, yes, Lieutenant, ain't happening. It ain't happening. I just, doing what I was doing. One of those jobs, like the bomb squad, was a lot of sitting around doing nothing. A lot of our stuff was in and around July 4th, fireworks, and going. We didn't go on too many jobs of fireworks to bring them up to range, but some of the stuff you had to go out on, because it was either an apartment building. I can remember going up to the Bronx one time. It was a DOA in the room, and they had fireworks. They told us to remove them. I'm like, all right, with the DOA in the room. It was kind of weird. Wasn't much, but okay, we did that. We wouldn't normally respond on fireworks. I can remember one time, I think it might have been July 4th. I get a call in the 2-0 precinct. Guy had fireworks, and he blew his hand off. I get up there, and I remember asking, well, what hospital did the guy go to? Because I eventually had to go to the hospital. He said, oh, no, he's next door in the other building. I said, he said he blew his hand off. Turns out this guy blew his hand off previous incident. He was a guy in his 30s, missing a hand, and he was making his own fireworks with one hand, and he set the apartment on fire. So I went and interviewed him, and got his information, and like, okay, this is going to be used against you in court eventually. But it was just weird stuff like that, and like I said, it was a lot of sitting around, and then when all hell broke loose, it broke loose on us, It a number of times. Like I said, the 93 bombing, the Flight 800, then 9/11, so.
I will ask you before I get to this is the last thing I'll ask you before I get to the concluding segment. And I always like to ask this of guys that retired around that time, especially 02, 03. If not for that, I mean, if we would have been having this conversation, let's say in April of 2000 or July of 01, and I would have said, because by that point you had 19 years on, Steve, you thinking about retiring? What would you have told me if not for that day? What would you have told me if I would ask you that question, July of 01?
I probably would have stayed another 5 years on the job. I was having a good time of it. I had time on the job, I had time in the unit. I enjoyed the guys I worked with. I probably would have stayed around for at least 5 more years. I was 46. I was in where was I going to go?
Right.
I thought I'd go back to work with the Sandhogs. I did try to do that, and I worked 1 week with the Sandhogs after retiring at some point, after recovering from everything. And I go to a job site not too far from the bomb squad office. Actually, it was part of the water tunnel. These guys are talking. They gave me a nice job because I had time in the unit. Gave me a top foreman's job, and the thing is that the guys were talking about injuries. The guys were talking about who got a broken leg and all that. And all I can recall is how dangerous that job is now. The job I got wouldn't have been dangerous, but one of the responsibilities was making sure that things got to these guys down this 900-foot shaft, without breaking loose and falling on them, and me being a part of the cause of them getting injured. I said I couldn't handle that. Turns out that I was really still suffering from PTSD of 9/11. So, yeah, I thought I'd go back to work with the Sandhogs, and that just didn't work out. And ended up working with the private security company doing bomb security work for the next number of years until I retired. 4 years ago now? You know?
Well, yeah, I'm surprised, and this is a good thing. This is a compliment to you. And I guess I'll ask you one more thing before the concluding segment, and because it's interesting, you've been an open book tonight about things that guys have a hard time talking about, understandably. Now that we're almost 21 years down the road, and the anniversary's coming up next month, falls on a Sunday this year. Granted, the memories of lost friends never goes away, and obviously you miss them all the time. But what's helped you? I don't want to say make your peace with it, but be able to come to terms with it and not let it dog you like it used to.
I think my family did. My wife certainly did. My wife went through a lot with it. She had to put up with my antics, my PTSD. It was tough, but she helped me along. My daughter was quite young at the time, and just watching her go through high school and then college helped, and then my son having children, so that helped. Having grandchildren in my life and going back to work, as tough as it was at first, wanted to make money. I wasn't through making money at 46, 47 years old, and I knew that. And some guy says, "Oh, you should have done this. You should have done that." And I did what I thought was right for me. Keeping my hand doing the security work that I did was almost pretty much what I did in the bomb squad, walking around with a dog, in a couple locations, and that helped. The one thing I'd like to say before I forget,
Sure.
About 4 years ago, maybe five, 6, 5, no more than 5. I realized that guys are getting really sick from exposure to 9/11. And what happened was I reached out to Gene Kelly was running the stuff through at the time. I can't remember exactly. I know she worked at a hospital that was dealing with a lot of guys that were coming down with the cancers. And I went with my wife. I had to actually go with my wife because the PTS kicked right back in me having to talk about this stuff. But I sat down with Jean and my wife. I talked to her on the phone. I think she told me to bring my wife. I think she could hear it just talking to me at the time. And, she talked me into getting tested, getting the 9/11, whatever the heck it's called now. I can't think now. But registered with them and getting tested. I do have sleep apnea really bad. They put me. They sent me for testing for that. Put me. Gave me the CPAP and supplied me with that, and also the acid reflux, real bad. My understanding, not knowing at the time, but Gene had said that the spike in acid reflux, which leads to esophageal cancer and other things, is pretty high. And I went down for initial testing, X-ray, I guess, of my lungs, and what they found out that I had was an aneurysm on my heart. 9/11 doctor says, "Well, your heart, your lungs are good. You got one spot, and it's so big, and it's not that big, but you do have an aneurysm on your heart. You better seek medical attention for that." Of course, I go to my doctor. He sends me to a heart specialist, and he sent me to a thoracic surgeon, tell me, what I have to do to avoid this aneurysm getting any bigger. But I wouldn't have known this. But other guys too, the same thing. Make sure you get out there. People that were down there exposed to that stuff, including civilians. Plenty of civilians coming down with these crazy cancers. The spikes are high. I talked to people about it, and they said, "Well, how do they know? How do they know it came from there?" It's because the spikes in the New York area are tremendous, as opposed to California and Colorado and all these other places that, people that came down there for just an hour. I was exposed to those fumes, and luckily I had a mask on. I had mask in my jump bag that I put on. What do you call it? A decent mask, but that got clogged. But I still took some stuff in there. But again, go out and get tested. You know, a couple hours out of your life, a day or two, whatever it takes. Get registered. My understanding, there will be only so much time that you could get, get tested, before these whatever runs out. As we all know, 2 guys in the bomb squad have died since 9/11 from exposure to the stuff down there. The other thing you talked about the bomb squad being such a small unit, but being such a small unit, we've had quite a few guys get killed over the years, since the forming of the bomb squad in 1903. But I think up to 8 or 9 guys now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's line of duty. It's 6 because it's just Lieutenant Petrosino got shot and killed in 1909.
But such a small unit to have so many guys died, from injuries.
Right.
World Trade. I mean the World's Fair bombing in 1939 and 1940. All right,
yeah.
And other guys too.
Yeah, it's Lieutenant Petrosino first in 1909. He's the only American police officer to ever die in the line of duty overseas. He was investigating the mafia. Then it was Socha and Lynch, Ferdinand Socha and Joseph Lynch at the World's Fair on the 4th of July of 40. Vince Connolly got killed in a car accident on his way to an explosion scene in 73. I mentioned Brian Murray earlier, and then Danny Richards on 9/11 of 2001. And then since then, Ronnie Richards died of 9/11 cancer, no relation to Danny. He was an ESU guy that came over to the bomb squad, and then there was Louis Alvarez, who came over from narcotics, I think, at the bomb squad. And
it just made me think about it. And when I got back to the bomb squad office that day, on 9/11, Murray died on 9/11 also.
Yeah, 9/11 of 76.
9/11. I actually looked at his picture and said, "Wow, what a crazy coincidence!" That he would same day.
Yeah. And, I look at those 6 plaques, but if you ever, and I got to get down to the bomb squad, and I'm going to try to before the year is out. If you have the fortune of looking at that memorial wall and seeing the faces of those heroes, how they died differs. Danny Richards, a terrorist attack, a building collapse, Brian, a bomb, Vince, a car accident, so on and so forth. But there's a quote underneath it, and you remember that quote, which is, "It is not how these men died that made them heroes. It is how they lived." And I think you go down the line on each guy, and you can certainly testify to that.
I wouldn't be able. Well, I could probably be part of it, but never tattooed on my arm. Yeah, it's not how these people. It's not how the guys died that made them heroes. It's how they live. It's tattooed on my arm. Got that 2000 and I think 2002, early 2002.
Yeah.
But,
it was a great career for you, and this has been great. This has been a great show, and we'll end as we always do with the rapid fire, and it's 5 hit-run questions from me, 5 hit-run answers from you. You can say pass if you want. I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you ready?
Well, yeah. Some of the things that might be a little tough. So go ahead.
That's all right. First, funniest call you ever responded to?
Funniest call. Now, one of the funniest jobs I ever had was actually on patrol. Was down in up in the 50 precinct in Riverdale, last block before the Hudson River. I can't remember the street. Might have been Independence Avenue. In November, with a cop, I'm driving the car, and the guy's running towards us, completely naked. Now, remember, it's in November. It's cold, but it wasn't too bad. But he's completely naked. Comes up over a hill and is running towards us naked. And I stopped the patrol car. I rolled the window down a couple inches. He stops. He's sweating profusely. And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "The Germans are coming. The Germans are coming." And I said to him, "Keep running. I'll hold them off." And he says, "Okay." And he started running again. He ran away from. All right, Mike, look up now. And he started running away from us. And the guy I was with, he's a little strange. He actually ended up losing the job because he doled positive for marijuana some years later. I think he had 14 years on the job. He told positive, so he's probably a pothead at the time. He said, aren't we going to go get him and take him to the hospital? And he had a year on the job more than I did. I said, there's no way we're going to do that. Reason one, we don't have too many guys out on patrol right now. There's only a couple of us. The sergeant would get really mad, and I don't really feel like spending the rest of the tour in North Central Bronx Hospital with this guy. I said, he'll get home. It's cold out. Eventually, he'll run home. And the funny part is, ain't the first guy that I seen walking naked in the city. Number of times down by, at least twice down by, Madison Square Garden. And counted that a number of times in the city. Driving by at 2:00 in the morning, going to a job or going to something in a bomb squad vehicle, and looking across 34th Street, and here's a guy just strutting up the block completely naked. I'm like, I elbow the cop I'm with, the bomb squad technician, and point at him. He just shakes his head, and we just kept driving. I mean, what are we gonna do? We got jobs to do. That's pretty much one of the funniest things that happened to me. That I could recall. The naked guy up in Riverdale. So.
I couldn't help but look down. I'm sorry. It's just I was laughing so hard. I'm picturing that. That's what made me look down. I got the secondhand embarrassment.
Probably, the right thing would have been out there, go put him in handcuffs and take him. But it wasn't happening. I wasn't going to deal with this naked guy.
Let ESU and EMS handle that. That's what they do. They can have the EDPs.
You know what? They didn't have to be bothered with that either. I'm sure that wasn't the first time that guy was high on whatever he was high on, walking around naked in Riverdale. So whatever. Yeah.
Second thing you loved most about working in Greenwich Village. You kind of touched on it earlier, but you can expand here.
Probably the best thing was my commute. I had a 10-minute commute by subway. Got on 72nd Street. I would get on the express if it came. Well, I always waited for the express because that brought me right down to 14th Street. Got off at 14th Street. Well, 42nd, 34th, I think it was, and then 14th Street. Get off at 14th Street, either walk a couple blocks, depending on the weather, or take the next local down to Christopher Street. Yeah, getting in and out of the office, 10 minutes. Other guys were, one of my partners, he lived in Queens. He was probably 7 miles away from the office. It would take him 2 hours to get home sometimes, to the point that we were down in Alabama together doing training, and they were talking about commutes, and one guy took 100 miles to get to work, but he was in an apartment vehicle and doing 100 miles an hour and some trooper vehicle or whatever. And I looked over and said, hey, Pete, tell him how long it takes to get to work. He says, home. He said, yeah, sometimes 2 hours. They said, how far away do you live? He said, I don't know, 7 miles. They couldn't believe it, but I said, yeah, that's the city. But I'd get on that train and be home in 10 minutes. Same thing coming to work, so. One of my favorite things, and just working in the environment that we worked in and the guys I worked with, that was always fun. The guys I worked with, especially some of the stories from them in ESU and a couple of them that were in Vietnam, some of the crazy stuff, they had some of the real characters. And I didn't find out that many years later, one of my partners, was it George Murphy? Yeah, George Murphy, won the Silver Star and was awarded the Silver Star in Vietnam, and not knowing that, but reading his citation, unfortunately, at his wake, and then asked his wife, can I read the citation? Actually, I asked her if I could take a picture of it. It was too long to read. So I took a couple of pictures of it and read it at home, and when this guy didn't know it when he was in the bomb squad, and he won was awarded the Silver Star.
I think Charlie Epps was like a sniper too.
Charlie Epps was he was a helicopter, if I remember right. He was on the helicopter. He was that gunner on the helicopter. So yeah, Charlie was he was a piece of work. He was a tough guy. But working with guys like that, Charlie Hill too, another guy that talking to him, and he said he did things over there he couldn't talk about. That it was classified, some of the stuff he did. So
I wish he was still around because I would have liked to have gotten him on the show.
Great guy, boy. Had a lot of laughs with Charlie. Tough guy, another guy, another strong guy. wasn't a big guy, but strong. Strong for his size. Very strong man.
Third, because you're a Yankee fan, top 5 favorite Yankees of all time.
Derek Jeter, Mickey. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Mickey Mantle as a kid. Derek Jeter. I don't know if I have 5.
You can say like 3.
Jeter. Derek Jeter really sticks out in my head so much, though, because he wasn't just a great Yankee player; he was a great guy.
Yeah.
Rivera, without a doubt.
Sure.
Watching those games with him, and another great guy, still a great guy, still around too, still doing his thing up in Mount Vernon. So, those 3.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Fourth, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City, and you could say multiple. There's a lot of good ones. Greenwich Village.
Now, I can't tell you how many hours they spent in Jesse James, right next to 50th Precinct, without a doubt. As far as restaurants, I would still say Velasquez down in the Village. I still like going down there. I don't get down there enough. A little tough getting in and out of the city anymore.
Yeah.
But Velasquez in the Village, a little Polish Ukrainian place.
I gotta check it out. Well, you don't want to be in the city these days, anyway. I love the city. City's a little nuts right now.
Not a fancy place, but man, always had a good meal in there. I can remember just getting some great dinners in there. Takeout, and too lazy to cook or too busy to because we on jobs or one of the things we would do. And I'd come in. The first thing I would have to do is look at see if we had any sweeps to go through that night. With the dog, and knew whether dinner was in or out. So one of those deals.
And fifth and finally, if you can grab a guy that just came back from Huntsville, he's new, he's eager, or she, and they're eager to get to work. Given your experience, has got 15 years almost as a bomb tech. If you could pull a new bomb tech to the side, fresh out of Huntsville, what advice would you give him? What would you tell him?
I would tell him to take every job serious. They can't stress that enough down in Huntsville. Take every job serious. Make sure you listen to the guys that are around you. Don't get tunnel vision on the job. A lot of guys, I've been guilty of that myself, and not focusing on certain things around you. Things could go south real quick, and just be ready for it if it does. We've had, like I said, a couple incidents, guys getting hurt. My time, just don't panic over it. Just, rely on the equipment big time and make sure the equipment is working. I remember Billy Kennedy talking last week about the equipment check. Very important to make sure the equipment's working. Check everything. Check it twice. I know they have a lot more equipment in the bomb squad office than we had. The robots got a lot better. I had, right before 9/11, been down to Huntsville on a 2-week course. One was the refresher course, and the other one was with robot school. And I did everything I could to break that robot. And one of the instructors was a retired state trooper that I knew for quite a few years. He was a bomb tech, and he was laughing. He said, "Go ahead, try to break it." I tried turning it upside down. I tried doing not upside down, but sideways, and couldn't break it. It was a great piece of equipment. So, but again, it has its limitations where you could bring it, where you can't bring it. You're not bringing that up into a 5-story walk up. Yeah. So, but
No, you're not.
Use it and rely on each other for the stuff, for guidance in it. So, I know some of the guys are still there. That only a couple. Well, like Mark Torrey, he's still there.
Brian Coughlin
is still there. Rely on their time in the job. Really important. I don't know how young the guys are getting in the bomb squad now, and I know there's quite a few sons of fathers that were in there. That's kind of like funny to see.
Okay, John DeLillo, just to name a few.
Quite a few guys. Which is kind of cool. They listen to their dads, and neither one of my children went into the police department, never mind the bomb squad. So, they're doing very well on what their work that they do. So
I'm happy just to talk to you guys about it. I would never want to do that kind of work. I'll just stick to hearing the stories from you. But this has been great. Don't sign off yet. We'll say goodbye off the air. And a shout out to the Berberich family for letting me steal your husband / father / grandfather for a couple of hours here. It was great. Before we go, and I'll give a shout out to the audience in order momentarily. Is there any shout outs you want to give to anyone or anything?
Yeah, I'd like to say hello to Mark Torrey and thank him for still being on the job. I over the years of retirement, I would run into different cops, and a lot of them would talk. I can't wait till my 20th year, and I would say, you know what, that's not a good way of looking at the job. Don't look at it like, I'm going to put my time in and get out. Some guys never had that opportunity to put their 20 and get out. Guys that went, got killed while working. But don't look to run off the job. Being a long time resident of New York City, and my daughter's still down there, right? When I see guys that have time on a job, I thank them for staying. Don't run. We talked to a lot of retired guys afterwards, and a lot of them are doing well. Some of them aren't doing too well, health wise, up in age, but they're still around, still kicking. So
still chugging. So shout out to them. No, for sure. Shout out to them. Shout out to our friends in the chat tonight: Billy Ryan, Jay Driscoll. Sorry about that, Jay. Didn't mean to butcher your name. Steve Stephanakis, Joe Maliga, Christian Williams, Jason Moody, Christian Flood, retired first grade detective out of Hostage. Howard Blank, retired out of Taboo. Steven Soslavsky, U Dizzy, 1969. Maui Swift, Gregory Green, retired 28-year veteran of the NYPD. Pete Pranzo, retired NYPD lieutenant. Ruth Ann Griffin, her dad was an E-man. Leo Griffin, Stu Kelsall from across the pond in England. And, that's about it. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. Everybody that'll watch the replay, thank you in advance for watching. So this Friday is the milestone 200th episode of the Mike to New Haven podcast. I went all out for it. I hope to have a lot of people in the chat watching that night. My guest will be a very interesting guy. And his experience on 9/11 was literally captured moment by moment by a film crew inadvertently. And that's Chief Joe Pfeiffer, who will join me for volume 23 of the Best, the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. He's going to be the milestone 200th episode for this show. In the meantime, on behalf of retired NYPD Detective Steve Berberich, I'm Mike Colón. This has been another edition of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's bomb squad. And we will see you next time for the milestone episode 200. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.
Good night, guys.
Thank you.